Good morning. We've already got a quorum, and it's also the time to start our meeting. We have 6 funding proposals put to us by the administration. The first 3 were in the previous agenda, and have not been completed. I'd like to remind members that you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in respect of items to be discussed today. Please declare interest according to Rules Procedure 83A. Before you speak on the item, please disclose the nature of the interest. I'd like to draw members' attention to Rule 84 of the ROP with regard to voting under pecuniary interest. We will continue to discuss an outstanding item. Item 1, Head 703 Buildings. Paper PWSC 2015-16 3272RS, Kai-Tak Multi-Purpose Sports Complex. The paper proposes to upgrade part of 272RS to Category A at an estimate cost of $62.7 million in money of the day prices. On the 15th of April, the subcommittee had already started discussing the item, so we will continue with the discussion. To answer members' questions, the officials are officials from the Home Affairs Bureau and the Architectural Services Department. At the previous meeting, 15 members made the first round of questions, and then 4 members at the second round. So those who are waiting for the second round, let me check. Mr. Wu Chi-Wai. Thank you, Chairman. It's about the policy of sports for all in respect of the MPSC. I hope the study well, they have a technical study. They will have a technical study, but they also need to have a long-term sports policy. Now they are going to apply for funding for the construction of projects which will cost more than $20 billion or $25 billion. That's a big complex. If it's all about building a complex, at the end of the day, you may need to rely on the sort of concerts like Lady Gaga's concert. That is not the idea in our mind in respect of the MPSC. I'm not saying that having a popular concert is wrong. But what strategy does the Bureau have to popularize sports, to promote community sports? Will the MPSC just have big projects for 2 months in a year, and then for the remaining 10 months, the MPSC facilities just drying under the sun, or the MPSC venues are used for other activities which have no relationship with sports? Will you give an undertaking, the Bureau, will you give an undertaking that in the coming 2 years you will improve your promotion of community sports or sports for all, so that people will become more and more like participating in sports? As for the usage rate of the venues, the average usage rate is about 80%. That means during the peak hours there are a lot of users, but during the non-peak hours there are still a lot of vacant venues. When we were young, the sports venues were free. We can go there, play ball. We could go there, play ball games. Recently, we had changed the mode. Now you have to apply for a venue before you can go there and play. Will you change your fee charging policy to promote sports? I'd like to remind members that according to my recollections, formulation of sports policy arising from the MPSC application is a question which has been asked many times before at the previous meeting. If I may ask the Deputy Secretary to respond if there is anything new. The Deputy Secretary, please.
So, with regard very briefly to the first point, I won't repeat what I said at the last meeting. However, I can definitely assure members that when we're going through the detailed planning process in the pre-construction stage of this project, we will be consulting not just the sports community but other stakeholders very closely to ensure that all the facilities that we provide at this complex are consistent with our objectives for sport policy. And I do recognise that that is an area of concern, that we must do that work. As regards the second point on public facilities, in terms of usage rates, the peak hour usage rates for indoor sports facilities are generally over 90%. The average rates are around about 80% because quite often in the less peak hours there is lower usage. In terms of allowing free facilities, our intention is that this complex as a whole should have space for free facilities such as outdoor basketball ball courts, outdoor football courts, and in fact the current policy is to allow free use of facilities by schools during non-peak times, and I'm sure that policy will continue, Chairman.
Next, Mr. James Toh. Chairman, it is about the 50,000 people venue. I want to ask the administration. 50,000 spectators, a venue with 50,000 seats. Is it already predetermined? Do you think that is 30,000 is optimal or 40,000 is optimal? Is it the idea of the CE? He said $50,000, 50,000 people. Therefore, that would be 50,000 people. According to the study, has it been found that 50,000 is optimal? Say you expect that the seating will be 50,000, what will be the usage rate? And if you say how many days in a year will that be filled or will be used? And if you lower it to 30,000, what will be the result?
Even since 2010, when we first started doing the initial technical feasibility study for this project, we've been looking at exactly that same question. In terms of the main stadium at this complex, what is the optimum size? We settled on 50,000, I think, for a number of reasons, as an indicative figure. First of all, we do have a number of events taking place, sports events taking place annually, for which there is unmet public demand for seats and for tickets. I'm sure that many people know that not just the rugby sevens, but also major football matches featuring international teams coming to Hong Kong have regularly been sellouts at the stadium. And in fact, such events also attract ticket touts, such as the demand for tickets. So clearly, if we were just to have 40,000, we would still have a large unmet demand from the public for the most popular events. Secondly, we have looked at comparable stadia elsewhere in the world and in the region. We've looked at cases such as Melbourne, for example, where the main stadium that's used as a multi-purpose venue is a 50,000-seater. The new stadium being built or that's just been built and completed in Singapore as part of their sports hub, has 55,000 seats. Again, that is a multi-purpose venue. And our feeling was that, taking all things into consideration, if we're to develop a venue that takes us forward and that allows more events and greater public access in a multi-purpose environment, then we felt that 50,000 was the indicative figure that we would look for. However, we are still at the planning process. During the detailed pre-construction work and planning work, we will be looking at whether there is scope for this figure slightly to increase, although there are site constraints that mean it will not be able to increase much above 50,000, or whether in fact 50,000 is too many. I very much doubt it's too many, bearing in mind that even if you only have 30,000 people coming to an event, they can still fit in a 50,000 seat stadium quite comfortably. However, if you build for 30,000 and 50,000 people want to come, you've got nowhere for them to go. And I think we do need to build in for the additional capacity that will allow us to bring more events of this nature and allow Hong Kong people the chance to go and see them.
The chairman have no doubt that in this world, after you've built a big stadium for 1 or 2 or 3 days, you can fill the stadium up to 50,000 or even more.
And when I said optimum, you can't say that this is a ballpark figure, and we don't want to disappoint 1,000 or 10,000 people. That's why we have the 50,000 seat stadium. By optimum, I mean what events will take place, or mega events or games will take place in this stadium, and how many days. Well, at least we're talking about a dozen days or 30 days. That will be a better estimate of usage. Of course, if you have 100,000 seats, of course it can accommodate 30,000. And if there is only one day when you need 100,000, and you go ahead to build 100,000, Deputy Secretary, in the last meeting, this question has been asked by more than one member. I would like to see what answer you will give to dispel the concern of members. Please try again.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do my best. I don't have a crystal ball. However, the best we can do at this stage is to look at trends both in Hong Kong and overseas for these kind of venues. Certainly in Hong Kong, if you look at the situation 10 years ago, we had very, very few events that would actually fill the Hong Kong stadium. Now, with the increased time that is spent on the Rugby Sevens, with the fact that the Rugby Union is now bringing in international matches featuring the top sides, the fact that we now have competitions such as the Barclays Asia Challenge bringing in top teams from the English Premiership, as well as an additional level of international matches featuring overseas teams, you've clearly seen a trend in the past few years to more events that have a large unmet demand that the public want to go and see. And the same is happening overseas as well, particularly where you see stadia that are run by private promoters. They are actually generating a far greater level of interest and creating greater content for sports broadcasters. It's simply a trend, and that is the fact that we can state unequivocally. There is clearly this trend, and Hong Kong is not able to handle this trend at present. We definitely need a new facility if we are to be part of this program.
I see that the Deputy Secretary, earlier on you said that this is only at a design and study stage. Please make it clear for the record. The figure, 50,000, is it etched in stone and cannot be changed?
There is the opportunity still at this stage to amend that actual number. This is our indicative figure for current planning purposes. We are prepared to be flexible on the final number that we will present when we come back for the funding for the project.
Your answer has been recorded. Mr. Ray Chan, thank you. I don't want to continue to argue about the 50,000 seat stadium. Well, after 2 days of meeting, I think you have lost the debate. You have lost your argument. We're not talking about whether to allow you to run concerts. Even that is the case, how many singers will attract a 50,000 seat stadium? Even for Hong Kong, maybe for 10 shows, there is not one show that the whole stadium is filled, because a lot of fans go back to see the same show. And if you say that if others have it, we should. And we should have vision. Of course, you can accommodate 1,000 people in a 100,000 seat stadium. And you told us about past demand. Well, I would still watch Wu Kok Hong, South China versus Seiko, even if I don't like sports. But now, how many events will attract a full house? Of course, you want to have a rugby sevens every single day, or you have the Chinese New Year football match, and there is a chance, if that is the case, that we have a full house. And you said that there is a chance that it can be increased. For other stadia, it's very interesting. It says there is at least 4,000 spectators in a multi-purpose sports center. And I think for this 50,000 seat, it may increase the number of seats. I mean, you failed to answer us. You told us about overseas singers coming to Hong Kong. Can you tell us whether more than 10 of them will come, say Madonna or Lady Gaga? We asked you what policy objective would you like to achieve by increasing your investment. Yes, you have reason to invest in hardware. You want to build them first, and there will be a policy and they will be put to good use. And I think it's your own wishful thinking. Of course, when a building is built, of course, you will have to do something to have events taking place there. And this is something I do not agree. And since the last meeting, the administration has not given us any new document information or figures. Is that right? Right. Thank you. I would like to ask some questions about the information on the document. Paragraph 20. It says the ASD has been engaged to conduct a further environment impact assessment. And previously, there was an EIA on the entire Kai-Tak development, not just about the MPSC. And this one will focus on the MPSC, and it says that it will be completed by the end of 2015. I want it confirmed. And my question is, why did you not wait for the EIA to complete before you take another step? Is it because you think that the EIA may show some major change?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask my colleagues from the Architectural Services Department to take this question?
Wang Lefei, sir.
Mr. Wang? We are working on the EIA report. Hopefully, by the end of this year, we will be able to submit it to the Environmental Protection Department. You're right in that when it comes to design and operation, there needs to be mitigation measures. The EIA report will be submitted to the EPD. Once it's endorsed, we will proceed. We hope that we will be able to, within this year, get an approval from the EPD, and it will be in the public domain. So you expect the EIA to be completed in this year, and within the same year, the EPD will give you an approval. We will definitely finish the EIA report, but when it comes to the approval, it depends on the EPD. Next, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Chairman, this time is an application to upgrade part of 272RS to Cat A. It means you are opening another door to spend more money. It's for the next stage to do more site investigation work, etc., for another major project. People don't understand. It's only $60 million. Why don't you give the approval? Well, it's just like when you go to the barbers. Once your hair is washed, it's wet, you can't leave. So as soon as you step inside the barbers, they will wet your hair. And then they will tell you, well, we have increased the price yesterday. It's no longer $5, it's $10. Well, I I was trapped. I got shampoo in my hair. I could not leave. These are tactics. And I ask you about the 50,000-seat stadium. You really have to give us data. What mega events will attract 50,000 people that will fill the stadium? You ask the gold medalist from the mainland to come here, the astronaut to come here. They can't come all the time. And if it's some events hosted by C.Y. Leung, I'm afraid no one will turn up. You can't explain why you need a 50,000 seat and it's not supported by data. How can you ask us for money? I don't understand why Hong Kong people don't understand. Your policy will have to be supported by reason, data. We've been asking for it, and we are not given any. And you will have to explain to us why in the future there will be reasons. Say, for example, well, we will ask all the mainland badminton team to come to Hong Kong, and they will become Hong Kongers, and they will have events here, so there will be lots of people turning up. And you just said that at the Jubilee Centre there is sufficient training facilities. Is something wrong with you? We will be willing to give you money there. You have to first train. Lay a good foundation. And then you're only going to try to arouse their morale by showing them an empty venue? Ask the sports sector what plight they are in. Well, if you win a medal, then you will get sponsor. So if you miss one game and not get a medal, then you won't get any more sponsors. And the Olympics medalist said, I've only lost one game and I don't get any more sponsors. You see how what situation they are in. Did Zhang Duxing watch these video clips? Well, for people who have won us the copper medal or silver medal, if they've lost just one game, then they will lose the entire sponsorship, and they will have to turn from professional athletes to amateur athletes. And they don't have enough. Why are you asking us for so much? I really want to ask the athletes to come here. If you're watching, please WhatsApp me. I would like to tell you some moving stories. If you talk about a reform, it should not be done this way. And you're talking about enhancing our sports standard. If you're talking about a standard of white elephant projects, then I won't argue with you. But when it comes to enhancing sports standard, I'm afraid it's not supported by data. Mr. Lam Kwok Hong, I would like to tell you that even if you're WhatsApped by athletes, you can only tell us so much, because this is not, you're not an agony aunt. You can't tell us the entire stories of so many athletes. I just want to tell you about the blunders. Well, when it comes to walking into the barbers, having your hair wet, and don't know how much they'll charge, and the questions about the 50,000 seat stadium, and that you need to have sports policy in place before you go ahead with the MPSC, these have been repeated more than once. If questions along this line are asked, I won't allow, but I would like to ask the Deputy Secretary to answer one more time.
I don't have as much hair, so it doesn't cost me as much. I think in terms of the cost of this particular work, the pre-construction work, I can ask my colleagues to go through why we've arrived at this estimate. I feel this is a fairly solid estimate. In terms of the actual construction work, when we come back to this committee in 18 months' time, clearly we need to go through this pre-construction stage first and do the surveying and the technical studies before we can actually estimate what the final figure will be. In terms of the issue of The capacity, Chairman, I think I've addressed this several times. I can also, after this meeting, happily provide more examples of events, both in Hong Kong and certainly overseas, many events, whether they're sporting or other events, that attract upwards of 40,000 people.
Why don't you provide a documentation?
盡量唔好對話，梁議員。
Please don't have a dialogue.
Documentation after this meeting to show examples, many examples of such events. In terms of the general sports policy issues, I believe we've covered that already, but I would like to clarify one point, which is that in terms of the elite sports policy, it is not a condition of subsidy and subvention and assistance from the government that you get a medal in a major competition. We have many athletes training at the Sports Institute and outside the Sports Institute who receive government stipends and subventions who have not got medals. We hope they will get someday, but it's not an essential part of receiving the assistance from the government.
陳偉業議員。
Mr. Albert Chan, last time, Chairman, I have told you about the general objection about this MPSC. I think this is a disaster. And I believe that in the past 2 decades, this is the biggest and most serious mistake and disaster when it comes to planning. When it comes to land use, well, I talk about the 28.2 hectares can build 40,000 seats using a plot ratio of 9. Even if you use 5, we're talking about 20 to 30 units. So when it comes, given our housing demand and the lack of land in the urban area, and CY Leung has been saying that housing is the most important area of all. This sports city, well, it was first floated in C.H. Tung's time. During his election campaign, it was a commitment. It was a promise made to Timothy Fogg. And on many occasions, we have said that we have reservation about the choice of location, and we ask for review. And you talk about the so-called people from or views from the sports sector. I don't know whom you've asked. If you ask the athletes, then you know that the majority of the events will not be sports. If you look at international stadium, it's also used for recreational, leisure, or even commercial activities. There are huge stadia that are used for car shows. So it will take priority over sports. And you talk about this mega sports complex with accommodation, with a swimming pool, diving pool. It should be a genuine sports complex, not this one. This is neither fish nor flower. The choice of location is wrong, and the design itself does not meet the demand of people who know sports well.
This is just a political undertaking. If you don't do it, you have reneged on your promise, and if you do it, it's a waste of money. And that's the neither fish and fowl decisions made by the SALG government, which have been repeated time and again. I oppose the Hong Kong to Hai Macau Bridge. In this council, 2 or 3 people were against it. I said that it would become a white elephant. There would be very few traffic. That's the same for the Shenzhen Western Crossing. The same for the cruise terminal is another white elephant. You've built one white elephant after another. The loyalists in this council just rubber stamp the proposal of the government. They don't consider cost effectiveness. They blame us. Leung Kwok Hong has done an assessment on the link, and the link reads price had increased by 4 times. In Tin Shui Wai, the estimated cost of a car parking space was just 50 to 70,000, but the Wonderland Villas are selling their car parking spaces at $200,000 per piece. You see that the government is very weak in its work. Now, with regard to feasibility studies, Is there any occasion in which they don't put down the estimated budget for the whole project? I asked them how much the estimated cost of the project will be. And I have not seen any paper in which we are asked to consider the funding for feasibility study without the figure for the total cost of the project. What project of such a big scale has never accompanied by a rough cost of estimate of the project during the application for funding for technical studies? I need to put down another marker, and that is concerning cost effectiveness, whether it is political horse trading and whether it can be used for housing development. The questions have been repeated for more than 2 times, and I will not allow such questions afterwards. If I may ask the Deputy Secretary to answer Mr. Chen's last question concerning the budget of the whole project is not included in the paper. Is it the first time that you apply for feasibility study funding that you don't include such a number?
What we are asking for in this submission is simply funding to do the pre-construction work for this project. We are not asking for the full construction cost. That will come at a further and later submission to this subcommittee. And I believe this is common practice with most infrastructure projects.
So I am asking for President Case. I'm not asking for his explanation of why that is not included. When you look at previous projects,
was there a case in which the total cost of the budget was not included in the application for a pre-construction feasibility study? If there was, what was it?
This department who would be far more aware of any potential precedent cases or perhaps even the Financial Services and Treasury Bureau can clarify. I'm certainly not aware of any cases.
同埋副秘書長，可能你都有留意咧，陳偉業議員咧都唔係唔合理嘅。佢話咧。I
think that is not unreasonable. Even if you are not able to provide any example, you can give an undertaking to provide information afterwards. Mr. Wong. Yes, for Mr. Chen's question, I don't have the information in hand. So you provide it later. Mr. James Ho. Yes, I want to follow that up. Now, this is important. This is the PWSC. You should have an estimate of the total cost. Say this is $100 billion, or it may be just $1 billion. They will be entirely different. Well, if it is not worth doing, then members may just reject the proposal for the feasibility study, even for the feasibility study. Now you ask for, say, $60 million, but the total cost may be too big to be affordable. Members may have a different view, therefore, towards the technical study. You must have a rough estimate. You must at least have a rough idea. After all, it's just a rough estimate. Chairman, some questions may have been asked before. I will ask and see if it has been repeated. I'm thinking. Now we have a venue or venues which can accommodate 20,000 or 30,000 people. And there may be just full houses. There may be just a full house for 2 or 3 days in a year. Now, concerning your study, I asked about the brief. For this study, have you ever considered the optimal use of the venue? Now, we've already got a 30,000 seating capacity stadium. We shouldn't build something with 30,000 seats. So the idea is to build something more than 30,000 seats. But you need, as a government, to think about this. Now, with the 50,000 seats main venue, then those events that that should have been accommodated in a 30,000 venue, 30,000 seating venue, will be hosted in this 50,000 seating venue because the organizer expects that there can be a little bit more income, though it may not fill the whole 50,000 seats, all the 50,000 seats. So the usage rate of the 30,000 seat venue will decline. So what is the implication of this 50,000 seating on venue on the smaller venues? And will those smaller venues be put to other uses? Now, if you have the estimate, that will be helpful on planning the way forward. The Deputy Secretary, concerning the costs of the MPSC at the previous meeting, you mentioned more than once the number $25 billion, but the number is not in the paper. Are you willing to put it on record that you give us an estimate to meet the demand of the members of this council? The second point is getting the $60 million to do the study. Will that study include the implication of the MPSC on existing venues and future venues? How would that affect these venues? Would that be part of the study?
As I said at the previous session, based on the technical feasibility statement and the scope of the project in that statement as of 2010 and the initial estimate, the current estimate on that basis would be in the area of around about 25 billion Hong Kong dollars. However, I should caution that this is before we have done the detailed pre-construction work that we're looking for funding for today. In respect to the second question, in terms of the capacity of the venues at the MPSC and possible other complementary venues in Hong Kong, this will also be something that we will do further work on, further study on in the process leading up to the application for funding for the project and the tendering for this project, so that we have a very clear steer for the members of this subcommittee, but also for the tenderers for the project as to what the optimum size of the main venues will be. Thank you.
陳偉業議員。
主席就
Mr. Albert Chan, concerning the MPSC, I raised the point of security when I opposed the proposal at the TPP. Major stadia are moving from the town centers in other parts of the world. The old stadia are moving away from the city centers. In 2015, in the 21st century, only Hong Kong will be so stupid in building a major stadium at the center of the city. It's about the precious use of precious land. It's also about security. Now, for the Communist Party, they're so keen about security. There were hooliganism after a major football match in China. Now that is the government is very concerned about crowds, and the administration just treats the occupation movement as a crime. When there is a problem with the MPSC, then it will be a disaster for those living nearby, and people's lives will be threatened. The assessment has never, or the paper has never looked at the security issue. Can you explain whether you have looked into the security issue? I think the Democrats seldom raise the issue of security. Usually the loyalists are concerned about security. It seems the government and loyalists are not concerned about this, the security of MPSC. In Vancouver, in the Stanley Cup final, Vancouver, there was a riot, burning of cars, looting of shops. The chairman, if you know that some international groups are prepared to make money out of these events. Some crime groups are prepared to make money out of these big events. And after large-scale major international events, there are riots. The biggest disaster after a football match, have you ever estimated that? How many cars were burned? How many shops will be looted?
Detail, as that suggested by the member. However, obviously, we are very, very concerned. Any major facility of this nature, during the detailed planning stage, the security arrangements will be of major concern. I would like to clarify one point, however. You would actually find that there are many cities in the world that have major stadium infrastructure in very central locations. I can just off the top of my head quote Melbourne. I can quote Cardiff, the Millennium Stadium, which is right in the middle of the city centre, a 75,000-seat stadium right next to the main railway station. We've mentioned Singapore on several occasions. That infrastructure is being built in a very central location in the city. I would add also that, as we may have explained at the last meeting, the location of the main stadium itself will be within what is effectively a sports park. It is not surrounded by residential areas. It is actually in a large sports park with a lot of open space around the actual complex itself. We will certainly take security issues into consideration during the detailed planning stage of this project, as we would with any other major infrastructure project.
I asked for the information after the meetings. The stadia that he mentioned, when they were built, I believe that they were built like 3 or 4 years ago. So in the past decade, in the year 2000, how many cities have built stadia that have that accommodates 50,000? I know that there are some basketball courts or skating rinks in the city center that will house about the 10,000 or 20,000. But tell me how many of them.
Give supplementary information, and I can quote the example of the Singapore Stadium, which opened last year.
Thank you.
Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you. I have 2 questions. First, as we all know, that there will be a 50,000-seat stadium. Well, for the Hong Kong Stadium, it accommodates 40,000. In the past decade or so, well, apart from the sports events at the Hong Kong Stadium, what about asking events that are not affected by the weather to take place at the Hong Kong Stadium? I know that there is also the quantity surveying in the breakdown, but for a lot of the projects, when it comes to the quantity surveying, they will take reference from past amounts or figures in tender exercises. So I'd like to ask, in what circumstance that they would actually just stick to the actual quantity surveying instead of using past figures? You are asking about 12A Roman II, $9.8 million quantity surveying. Deputy Secretary.
Chairman, can I ask my colleague Ms. Law to answer the first part of that question, and then my colleagues from Architectural Services to answer the second part?
Okay, the first part. Sorry, speakers off mic. Please switch on Ms. Law's microphone. I think Mr. Wu was asking about whether we will invite non-sports events that are not affected by the weather to take place at the So-Kong Stadium. There is a big problem for events taking place at So Kwang Po. It's noise. We're talking about 40,000-50,000 people, especially if it's in the evening or at night. Since it's close to residential area, we see that there is a huge constraint. For non-sports events, they will have to make way for sports events. And for a long period of time, before every major sports event, we will have to maintain the pitch to make sure that it will meet the standard of the events that are to take place. So for So Kwang Po, there is only limited room for other events. In other words, do you mean no? None? That's not right. There are others, but limited. Say, for example, the Walk for Million of the Scouts. The Walk for Million is started at the stadium and also the Scouts Association. You invite them or they apply? They apply as far as I know. So you did not take any initiative to invite them. We'll have to look at the record of the stadium and our own record. I can't give you an exact answer. Please supply the information after the meeting. Another question about quantity surveying. Who is to take this question? Mr. Wong? Thank you. Well, actually, the work for quantity surveying consultant is quite complicated. We need to give them information so that they can take reference. Well, with the design, the consultant will take reference from past figures and make a quotation or assessment of prices with material prices of the day. I see that for funding application for construction projects, and they always told us that, well, for previous similar projects, it cost this much, and so they will use this. But when it comes to quantity surveying, my understanding is that they will calculate how much cement is used, how much material is used, and then you work out the cost. So under what circumstance would you take the approach I've just mentioned, and under what circumstance you will only get past figures from tender exercises? That's my question, and that's not answered. Mr. Wong, please focus on Mr. Wu's question. It's a very clear one. Usually the assessment of a consultant will be based on past figures because that's most useful to them, and of course they will they will get figures of the day as well, and they will have to look ahead, look into the future. The most important is that the design has to be detailed enough for an accurate figure to appear. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, I think it's a matter of division of labor. When it's completed, there will be Kai Tak, there will be the Hong Kong Stadium, the Coliseum, and a mega venue at WKCD. So what about division of labor of these different venues? And are they financially viable? Can they be self-sustaining? Deputy Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is actually a question that we've looked at and we've asked ourselves several times. Frankly speaking, the facilities that will be provided at the complex in Kai Tak do not duplicate the facilities that will be provided at West Kowloon and do not duplicate the facilities at the Hong Kong Coliseum, which is of a totally different capacity. The facilities, the one facility that will obviously be affected is the Hong Kong Stadium. And I may have mentioned at the last meeting that in an earlier briefing to the Home Affairs panel, the Secretary for Home Affairs has previously stated that it is currently our thinking that we would like to see the Hong Kong Stadium site remain as a public sports venue. However, we do recognise that it would be very difficult to justify it remaining in its current condition with 40,000 seats, because it would in many ways duplicate the new facility at Kai Tak. So essentially the new main stadium at the sports complex would be a replacement, and I would add a much needed replacement for the current Hong Kong stadium. We anticipate that the facilities at the sports complex, we would not have a 10,000 or 12,000 seat indoor venue of the nature of the Coliseum, so we would effectively not be taking business away from the Coliseum, nor the other way around, nor would they be taking business from us. We also feel that the infrastructure that we see currently planned for West Kowloon is of a very different nature from the infrastructure that we're planning to have at the sports complex in Kai Tak. Thank you.
Ms. Sit Ho, thank you. The Labour Party, when it agrees and supports sports for all, and if the sports park is open for the general public, and if there is a small green area, that will be good. But we have reservation about the 50,000 seat stadium, because the Hong Kong stadium is already there for sports events. The official may say it's not just for sports events, it can be a concert venue for many people, but we have the Hong Kong Coliseum, which seats over 10,000 people. And the WKCD, in the original plan, there is an open-air, large-scale facility. So we have doubts. On top of these venues, you ask for a 50,000 seat stadium. But every year, we only have the rugby sevens of all the sports events that we have, or when European football teams come to Hong Kong. Sorry, Ms. Ho, I've already made an observation. When it comes to the 50,000, whether it's a right figure, and whether it affects other similar venues in Hong Kong, which will affect cost effectiveness, are matters frequently asked in the meeting. But I'll let you finish. I'd like to draw your attention to just keep it short. Thank you. Thank you. Just give me back the time you've taken from me, surely. I want to ask the officials. For sports events, we don't have many. But when it comes to like international stars coming to Hong Kong in the Asia tour, it's a higher possibility. So I'd like to ask, what is your best case scenario? How much revenue will you be able to generate? How many of these international stars will come to Hong Kong to have a show? I don't want to see another white elephant project. If we think the assessment is not right, I'd rather see the scale of, I'd rather see the stadium scale down. Without justification, supporting figures, we will object to it. Deputy Secretary.
Thanks, Chairman. It's a very good question, and obviously we can't at this stage give a detailed estimate of what we consider might be the likely income from concerts at such a venue. I would make the general point, however, that watching major sports events is something that is also helping to promote sport in Hong Kong, as it does everywhere else in the world. It is something that ordinary people can enjoy, and there is clearly an unmet demand at our current sports facilities that more people would like to see events such as people in other cities are able to see, but which are not coming to Hong Kong due to constraints in capacity at our current stadium, due to constraints with the facilities, due to the fact that we are not able to put on the occasional type of stadium concerts that do take place in many other cities. So, Chairman, I do feel that we have a strong justification for going ahead with this venue as is.
主席啊，其實呢 Ms. Ho, I've spoken to some other officials to work out the figures. Every year, if we invite international stars to come to Hong Kong for 1 or 2 shows, 80% of the 50,000 seats taken, and the government will take 20% of the box box revenue. We were talking about $120 million. That figure to the Labour Party is an elephant that is white elephant that is too big, and I'm afraid we can't support you. Dr. Kokaki. On a number of occasions, Chairman, we should not get bogged down with the 50,000 seat stadium. I understand that, but so far the government has failed to give us justification to convince us that this is a genuine and good sports complex. And for all we know, it's more likely to be a concert venue. And if they treat this as a sports stadium when it actually will not be, I think it's dishonest on their part, and they have, to some extent, cheated the LegCo and the public, and I don't like it. The Deputy Secretary said that, well, watching the sports events can be an event itself, then we can just sit at home and watch the sports channels. We're talking about opening schools' premises for sports events to give more opportunities for youngsters and students to participate. There is very little effort given by the government. However, when it comes to this kind of project, they can spend tens of billions of dollars just to get more face. Now, an actual question. There are a lot of questions asked and doubts cast. And also saying that this is a white elephant. We're talking about $60 million this time. I'm afraid that the $60 million is not actually what it is. Say is for a study to see if we do need 50,000 seats. Yes, it may be worth it. But you're spending $60 million to see if we need the sports complex here in Kai Tak or elsewhere. Well, I think the direction of the government has changed somewhat. The government has low credibility. C.Y. Leung has been talking about getting more land to solve a housing problem.
因為自己如果係睇到呢一個土地係適合係作為呢個一個住宅嘅發展。特別係居屋同埋公屋嘅發展，而事實上我哋有啲地方咧唔適合起樓嘅。舉個例，主席喺陰澳即係大嶼山即係嗰度講到明咧就唔適合起樓，但係咧嗰度如果做一個體育活動，超過2萬人嘅一個體育嘅運動場咧適合，因為佢係冇噪音嘅問題，附近亦都政府係冇打算咧係即係喺呢個。
It's okay because there is no residential development nearby. Now there are many people waiting for PRH and HOS, more than 200,000 families. The government is just, I find it disgusting. The government is getting billions of dollars, say $20 billion. Just to make itself looking good. It's not for sports after all. It may be for concerts. I don't know how many famous singers will come to Hong Kong. Maybe most of them are going to China rather than Hong Kong. So you do an assessment on whether it is really necessary to build the capacity up to 50,000. Concerning making the effective use of the land, whether to build PRH on this site, the question has been raised at least 4 times before. The Deputy Secretary.
The planning intention for Kai Tak has been well established since 2007 as the result of a major public consultation. We have continued to consult the district councils in the area on the development of this facility and received overwhelming support for this to go ahead. I would like to make the point that there are 1.5 million people living in the 3 districts in East Kowloon who do not have enough sports facilities. This project will provide new public sports facilities, and in fact the overwhelming majority of the expenditure on this complex as a whole will go towards providing public sports facilities. That is a fact. There is a shortage of facilities. There's a shortage of running tracks. There's a shortage of football pitches. There's a shortage of indoor sports centres. There's a shortage of basketball courts. All these things will be able to be provided at this site, and these will help us to promote sport not just in these districts but throughout Hong Kong. I think that's a very, very important point that I cannot make too strongly with regard to this project.
主席，佢冇答到我嘅，因為我唔。
He has not addressed my question. I'm not against this issue. Now there is an indoor games hall. There are facilities for the local people. That's not the point. It's not debatable. The point is this 50,000 seating main venue. Your argument is not convincing. Is it really necessary to build such a big stadium there? That's the most important thing. You can't just cheat us and then ignore our view. Building the 50,000 capacities, 50,000 main venue, is it an issue which will be considered by the technical study? And after the study is done, is there a possibility that the 50,000 seat main venue will not be needed? What is your position? For the record.
The nature of these studies, the outcome of these studies will have a bearing on the ultimate design, detailed design and size of the various facilities at the sports complex.
Right. Without my reminding, you can cast. You have the right to vote, and we cannot get blood from stone. If we are not happy with this paper, you can use your vote to veto the application. I will assess whether your question is repetitive, so that I can effectively manage this meeting. The fourth round, Mr. Yang Kwok-hong. You are not sinful, but orderly. So in Chinese, they sound the same. Now you say that there will be office space of no less than 10,000 square meters, and then D, no less than 31,000 square meters of commercial space for retail and for catering. Apart from the 50,000 seating main venue, 31,500 square meters of commercial space, very big. 300,000 square feet. More than 400,000 square feet will be used for unknown purposes. Office space, is it for the government or for business? Are they short of, I've heard that they are short of grade 8 offices. Why are there so many provisions? If it is selling Kentucky Fried Chicken, I'm against it, because it's junk food. Will you prohibit the sale of junk food in the sports venue? On one hand, you say physical fitness, sports, and then on the other hand, you feed people with trans fat, something people will die after consuming too much of them. What do you mean by the 31,500 square meters of commercial space accommodating retail and catering business? What kind of retail business? What kind of catering business? What do you mean by commercial? What do you mean by office space? Now the Jockey Club has two valuable sites. One in Happy Valley, the other in Sha Tin. Another one is the golf course. For NT North East, we ask for public housing. They say the quality of the residents of public housing are low, and therefore that will affect the rich people playing golf. They will not be happy. Have you conducted a feasibility study? Say in Sangshui, the golf course, cut a piece of land for that, or in Happy Valley. Now you can do it underground. Okay, explain to me. What do you mean? Paragraphs, subparagraphs D and E under paragraph 4, 4D and 4E. How many such outlets? The Deputy Secretary, Mr. Leung, is asking a question in relation to paragraph 4. The items remain to be Cat B, D and E, 4D and E. Will you tell the PWSC now these category B items in relation to the proposed study? Will the proposed study study these things?
Part of this it is our intention to allow the Hong Kong's sports associations to occupy. Currently, they are occupying the space at Olympic House at the current Hong Kong Stadium. This office space provision will allow them to accommodate their staff in a much better situation than they are in now, which is frankly very cramped and very outdated. We also expect that there will be a need for additional office space for the management of all the facilities, and perhaps also we're looking at the possibility of attracting international sports associations to base themselves in Hong Kong, for which we would also need office space. The commercial space, again, like the office space, has always been part of this project as an integrated complex. The commercial space, of course, will provide retail and F&B facilities to people using the complex as a whole. Bearing in mind, as I said earlier, there will be a wide range of public sports facilities here as well as the main stadium, which will generate a considerable amount of through traffic. The commercial space also allows us to look at the options for having additional sports facilities such as ice sports facilities, such as 10-pin bowling facilities, which are also normally found in these types of commercial and retail spaces.
主席，
係梁議員，
我聽唔到佢講啲餐飲同零售係賣乜嘢喎
？I've not heard what F&B, what things are they selling?
To provide details about the exact tenant mix that we would have at the retail and F&B complex, but I do take into account the honourable member's concerns about the aspects that relate to health and the general sporting atmosphere of the complex.
副秘書長，其實第三段呢，你嘅文件呢，就係講你要提升甲。
In paragraph 4, you to upgrade category to category A, 3, A, B, C, and D and E, and then under 4, A until J, they will remain in category B. Under 3, A, B, C, D, E, there is the phrase the main works. For the record, the main works, do they cover A to J under paragraph 4? The Undersecretary. The Undersecretary.
Actually completed the work set out in paragraph 3, A to E. It is our intention, certainly at this stage, to proceed eventually with the works set out at paragraph 4, A to J.
Yes, so those items listed under 4 from A to J are actually the main works envisaged under 3 A to E. Is that your answer?
At this stage, Chairman, yes, that's the
Thank
position.
you. 郭家麒議員。
Dr. K.K. Kwok, I want to clarify this point. Now, under paragraph 4, B and C, I agree with that. These are the facilities that they have owed the people of East Kowloon. As for 4A, it is not for East Kowloon. It is for the whole territory. As for D&E, I do not see how are they related to the Home Affairs Bureau. Basically, it should be the work of the Development Bureau. This paper, therefore, is very unclear. I just want to know more about the breakdowns of the $60 million odd. How many will be spent on the study of 4A? And how much will be spent on C, D, and E, or D, E, F, G, H? How much is spent on the items that are related to the districts, so that we can have a better understanding how the money will be spent? The government has this practice. They don't want us to reject a certain item. Therefore, they bind it to another item. This is to just put the baby in a scoundrel in the same boat. And then if you want to save the baby, you need to save the scoundrel as well. I just want to know concerning AGDE, can they be separated so that we know how the money will be spent? The spending for the district should be done because they have owed them a lot.
You weren't talking about G, you're talking about A, D, and E. Yes, the three items. For B, C, and all the way down from F, I don't have any contention with that. DS, Kokaki was asking about 4, A, D, and E, three items.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in a second I'll just ask my colleague from Architectural Services to explain how the pre-construction work that we're currently seeking funding for will affect the overall scope of the facilities. But I'm sure that when we return, and hopefully we will return to this subcommittee in the next 18 to 24 months with a request for the funding for the entire project, we will then be able to have a far more precise indication of the cost of each of the elements and, in fact, the scope and scale of each of the elements based on the work that we're planning to do over the next 18 or so months on the pre-construction work. Perhaps I can now ask my colleague, Mr. Wong.
Mr. Wong. Thank you. The pre-construction study covers all the facilities in the sports complex because they affect one another. So there should be a comprehensive study. If it's fragmented, it will be incomplete. But as the DS said, when the detailed study is taking place, we will have more information about the individual facilities and will be in a better position to give you a fuller account. I believe that the DS will revert to you from time to time. I would like to follow up on what Mr. Wong said. You've heard it clearly. It's a technical point. I understand that in planning, you need to put things together. Say, for example, well, the 50,000 seat stadium, whether it is to go ahead will affect the study. But you don't have the green light from LegCo and you are wasting money that you should not have spent on it. Say, for example, we don't agree with 50,000, we only agree with 10 or 20,000. If there are a number of factors in the studies, would you consider separating them? Or if you set up the different scenarios, say under 20,000, 20 to 40,000, it will be more reasonable advanced assessment, and it's something that you should do. Mr. Wong, please answer. We plan for the pre-construction funding in accordance with the project specification. As a comprehensive study, it will be more effective. And technically, it should be the pursued course. They should not be broken down, and we work in accordance with the project specification. So I think you have divulged a secret. If you have to spend $60 million in the study, that means we're talking about $25 billion in the entire project. I won't pack it like this, but you've just said it. Don't retract it. Dr. Kwok, please refrain from having a direct conversation. My understanding is that they have to come back in 18 to 24 months, according to the DS. What they've said is why 4ADE can't be separated is for you to decide whether to accept it or not. Dr. Fernando Zhang, thank you. I won't repeat what has been said. Ms. Sid Ho has spoken about the various facilities, including the 50,000 stadium. That's a huge stadium. Are we doing it just for mega events, or can you really promote sports? I am concerned about people with disabilities in the use of these facilities. The year before last, the Hong Kong U, together with Association of PWDs, conducted a survey about sports prevalence. And it's a poor result. Less than 20% of the respondents are satisfied with the existing sports facilities. And I notice that this year the government will conduct a consultant study about sports development for PWDs. I am worried that the entire sports complex will include access for PWDs. I'm not just talking about barrier-free access. I'm talking about accessibilities of these facilities, whether they can use it. There is already a barrier-free manual in place, but when it comes to actually using the facilities, there are actually a lot of barriers. And the need for sports facilities for PWDs are different. Say, for example, wheelchair games, they need to practice, but when the facilities are open for others to use, when wheelchair users may not be able to use the same place alongside others because there may be dangers. And I've heard from PWDs that there are facilities, but they can't actually use them. I have seen nothing in the paper about considerations in this regard. Of course, we welcome the independent consultant report, but it is done in parallel. I am concerned that there may be recommendations from the other report, but for this study, it may be something completely different, and they can't be reconciled. So for the study on the MPSC, will you take into account the study for sports development for PWDs, and have you in this study considered the needs for PWDs?
I think as a general point, for a facility of this nature, it is essential that we take into account and meet in its entirety the needs of disabled athletes, disabled spectators, people who just want to take part in casual sports. We have actually, in the Bureau, we have had a meeting with the Hong Kong U research team and the representatives of the particular association, the Zikang Hitwei, that you mentioned just now, also in the presence of another member of this subcommittee. It was largely because of this meeting that we decided to embark upon this consultancy to ensure that we're aware of what are the needs of disabled athletes across the board, right from the very beginning to the very top level, and can ensure that they do not have any impediment to ensuring that they can enjoy sport just as much as anyone else in the community. Your specific question is, will this consultancy and the results of this consultancy feed into our overall planning for the Kai Tak multi-sports complex? It certainly will. And one of the organisations, or several of the organisations that we will be consulting as we move forward with the detailed planning will be not just the established disabled sports associations, but also other associations such as the one you've mentioned that have an interest in promoting sport generally for disabled people. So I guess in short the answer is yes, we will certainly take that into account.
May I follow up? At this stage, you have taken into account the views of some organizations. And in the future, at the completion of this consultant's report, in the construction of the facilities and future management, will there be a mechanism allowing the voices of PWDs to be heard, and that there will be continuous monitor to make sure that the needs are met? Yes.
In terms of the mechanism itself, we will be doing further internal consultation. We will also be looking at engaging another consultant, an operating consultant, part of whose mandate, contractual mandate, will be to consult certain named organisations. So part of the job they will have to fulfil will be to work in consultation with these organisations, and these will include the organisations for disabled sports and other interested people that I've just mentioned. So in terms of the mechanism, that is what will happen.
Ms. An Chang. Thank you. I know that this project has been under discussion for many years, that is the MPSC. In the Sports Commission, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of studies. So in the Sports Commission, do the sports representatives support this project?
The Sports Commission has been regularly briefed on this project over the many years that we've been doing the preliminary planning, and last year established a task force under the Commission itself to ensure that they can have a much more regular update and a more detailed update as we move into the more detailed planning process. I would add that in all our interaction with the sports community, there has been consistently a very high level of support, if not impatience, with the time we're taking. But I think they do understand that for a project of this scale, it is necessary to go through quite a lengthy planning process. But there is continued support from the Sports Commission and other stakeholders within the sports community for the project.
Ms. Chang? Well, West Kowloon covers Hong Kong, To Kwa Wan, Kowloon City, and it's very, as you know, that in Kai Tak there will be about 100,000 people moving to live there. If parts of the land is used to be developed into a green area with low density, of course people would like to see that. Of course, it will be better if it's a high density with loads of high rising blocks there. Hong Kong is a concrete jungle. However, some members of the public told me, I'm only repeating what they said, that there is not enough venue for cricket. So would you consider that when there are vacant slots, they can be used for cricket? And some people said that in Kowloon there were a couple of driving range. You know, members of the public may not be able to actually go to a golf course, but they can still practice in a driving range. And with this huge area, can some time slots be allocated for people to use it as a driving range? They would like the government to take their demand into account And looking at the entire MPSC, there are actually 3 areas. One is a public sports area, one is an indoor sports center, and one is a stadium. It seems that they take more or less the same area, take up the same area. It's not the case that the 50,000-seat stadium will take up the bulk of the land. The 3 actually take up more or less the same size. It's just that the stadium will seat more people. If you're going to have a 30,000-40,000 seat, you might as well build one that houses 50,000. Of course, if you can build a bigger one, of course you should do so to give more people an opportunity to participate. And also, please consider other sports. Yes.
Yes, Chairman. At the moment, there is quite a lot of space that is not decided finally what it will be used for. But I would also add that the facilities, the main 3 facilities that we're planning, are intended to be multi-purpose. So, for example, there is an option to use something like the public sports ground for, say, cricket or baseball or other sports by using a multi-purpose configuration.
But not a driving range.
And a golf driving range. The same considerations apply, yes.
Zhang Yu. Okay.
Mr. Loy Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Now, we had the new airport. There was a chance to vacate the Kai Tak for new development. Since then, there has been wide discussion on the use of land vacated by the Kai Tak Airport. One point is to take the opportunity to provide suitable facilities for Hong Kong. In paragraph 5, there are 3 objectives: to promote sports in the community, to support elite sports, and to make Hong Kong a center for major international sports events. These are the consensus of the people of Hong Kong. The MPSC has led to heated discussion in the community, and people are longing for the realization of this MPSC. Now, during a certain period of time, the administration wanted to scale down the MPSC and put up some residential blocks. Instead, there were strong reactions. Now we are going ahead with the MPSC. That's a good thing. The proposal is just to raise to Category A part of the project, which costs $60.7 million. That's for conducting a study. If members are concerned about future design, or they may have reservations on size or capacity, there is ample room to do so. There is ample room to discuss that in the future. We still have a lot of opportunities to discuss the details. If you look at items A to J, are in compliance with the promotion of sports in the community, support elite sports, and to make Hong Kong a center for major international sports events. If you are concerned about commercial space, food and beverage outlets, the details can be discussed, but you need them. Look at the Coliseum. If there were no large shopping malls nearby, how can large-scale events be organized at the Coliseum? Before and after going to the events, the audience or the spectators may need to have some food and a drink. These facilities are necessary. Mr. Chairman, We deal with policy matters at the panel, and then the PWSC deals with the project itself, and then the Finance Committee provides the funding. I think we have spent quite a lot of time on policy discussions, and that has gone far beyond the practice of the PWSC. We should go straight ahead to vote. I have no question for the officials. I want to support the funding of 62.7 million. Mr. Michael Tian.
I ask Mr. McKinney, what kind of target do you have for the 50,000-seater stadium in terms of number of sporting events per year? And you told us that you have no specific target in mind, and then you also raised the example of Lady Gaga. Now, and then I said, well, if we're going to fill 250 nights out of a year with Lady Gaga type of concerts, then this is actually not a sporting complex, right? Just now, I find it also very ironic that for somebody who's so passionate about sports, the Honorable Ho Sao Lan, also were asking you about the economic aspects of these non-sporting events, right? So it kind of gives me the feeling that nobody seems to be optimistic that if this stadium is built, that there will be a majority of events in the sports area, and that everybody has taken for granted that most likely it will follow the footpath of Colosseum, right? Then it got me to think, why is it that we have not been able to get more international sporting events into Hong Kong? I was looking at the Rugby 7. It started years ago as actually not a very major event. The last few years, my kids ask me if I can help them to get tickets. I have to keep calling around and can't get anything. So Rugby 7s can do something like that. So why can't we do, for example, soccer? It's actually very hot. You want kids to play soccer? You need to have top teams to come to Hong Kong. When you have top teams, the local people will pay to watch. Then you will have advertising revenue. Then they will keep promoting these people, right? And they will create icons for the young kids. And we will have people from neighboring countries coming to watch and help our tourist industries, hotel, everything, right? It's fantastic. But why has this thing not been happening? What is it that the government is doing wrong not to be able to put these major events? Because if you get top teams to Hong Kong, I am sure if initially there's no support from the local population, there'll be outsiders coming in, right? So what is wrong with our sporting policy? Please.
Deputy Secretary.
Chairman, I'm not sure I can answer that very last question. But in
I'm
terms
not sure either, but try.
Right. Certainly, in terms of the attraction of major sports events, the honourable member is absolutely right. I think we have seen in the past that when major international sports teams, football teams in particular, have come to Hong Kong, the current Hong Kong stadium has been completely sold out. So we've had the Barclays Asia Trophy, which brings 3 English Premiership teams to Hong Kong. In the past, they come to Asia once every 2 years. In the past 2 editions, they've come to Hong Kong on both occasions because they know that there's a huge demand. And on both occasions, the matches for those have been sold out. There have been invitation matches featuring Arsenal, featuring Manchester United, again, which have completely sold out. And even the events which did not actually sell out, like the Argentina game, the Paris Saint-Germain game, they still do attract very healthy crowds to watch such events. So in fact, I would like to say that we feel that there is certainly scope with an updated facility, with an improved facility, with better backup facilities, with a warm-up pitch, with improved spectator capacity, for us to attract and to grow exactly the type of events that you imagine. And our focus will be very much on doing that at the main stadium venue. Sure, we do need to recognise that there may be occasions when we can, maybe once or twice a year, host a big stadium concert of the kind that we're not currently able to do in Hong Kong, but many other cities in the region do. However, our primary focus will be on growing these large sports events, and certainly something like a Soccer Sevens, as you suggest, featuring some of the top teams in the world, would be the kind of thing that we would be looking at developing.
But in responding to my question last time, you certainly didn't show me this level of optimism as you have today. When I asked you whether you have confidence to fill them up with sporting events, the first thing you quoted was Lady Gaga concert. I suppose what you should have said is that you believed that you would have the ability to attract these major soccer events, the full size rugby kind of events to Hong Kong, right? So are you confident that the government can attract these teams? Because they can actually come to Hong Kong Stadium today. Are they not coming because of the venue limitation? Have they told you that they know the demand is here, and if you have this kind of stadium with that kind of facility, that they would be willing to come?
Deputy Secretary, another go at this question?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think there are one or two issues here. I can't recall my detailed response last time, but I was confident then and I'm confident now that the major focus will be on attracting sports events and not having concerts as the primary thing. However, the big differences, the two big differences between the current Hong Kong Stadium and the proposed new stadium, which will be part of the sports complex, are first of all, as we've discussed several times, the level of facilities that will be available, and the capacity for spectators, the comfort for spectators, the capability to make it a multi-purpose venue for different types of sport, not just concerts, but other types of sport events, such as motorsports events, such as equestrian events. There will be a lot more opportunities to use this proposed new facility than there are the current Hong Kong Stadium. The other point that's very important to mention is that the current Hong Kong Stadium is run by the government. It's run on what I would call a fairly passive basis. We take bookings, we pay the electricity bills, we turn the lights on and off. We do not really act as a promoter for events at the venue. In future, our intention is that the operating mode will be far more aggressive and that we will get a private sector operator coming in to help us run a venue such as this that has the connections with the IMGs, with the world sports groups, with the major sports organisations and the tours that are going on, to ensure that we're actually bringing events in rather than simply waiting for people to ring us up and book.
On routine, I'm afraid you have to take this up elsewhere. I'm drawing a line here. 下一位陳偉業議員。
Mr. Albert Chan, the administration, in answering the question on major sports venues, he referred to Singapore. The national stadium was demolished and then rebuilt. It is not a brand new stadium. It's a redevelopment. And the cost is 1.8 billion Singaporean dollars. It's about 12 billion Hong Kong dollars. Our 2010 estimate is $25 billion. And the actual cost turned out may be $50 billion, which will be 4 times that of Singapore. 4 times that of Singapore's. And then the Singapore Stadium, it has water on both sides and is separated by a highway. There are no residential buildings nearby, but in Kai Tak, around Kai Tak, there are 1 million people living. In terms of land use, they are completely different. If you look at Singapore, the decision is reasonable. But if you look at Kai Tak, if you understand Hong Kong, many members have repeated that this is a planning disaster. Some members say that it's in line with the objective for sports, community sports, and sports to support elite sport. But I would say that it is to make sports a white elephant, to make sports a luxury, to make sports for the rich and famous. Some say that the MPSC will provide space for the residents nearby. But in fact, you're building a big white elephant next to your home. Those living in Happy Valley will not be happy about the Hong Kong Stadium. If you take away the Hong Kong Stadium, the residents of Happy Valley will be very happy. What's your question, Mr. Chan? I have a question on security. Chairman, I criticize the government many times. In recent years, the administration has been unprofessional and improper in providing the documents. The document should include information on cost effectiveness. There is none in the paper. And when there is a large project, it looks at social impacts. There is social impact study, but there is none in this paper. In recent years, the government doesn't have such information in their papers. And this is a very important issue, and that is security. He said there is no security assessment. That's a policy oversight. Or is it the failure of the Security Bureau? Maybe the Permanent Secretary for Development can explain why, when it was put before the Town Planning Board, there was no assessment on security, and yet the Town Planning Board approved that. It's just you are handling it with, if you're handling with care, or you just close your eyes. Mr. Chow, it was many years before. Well, then I'll apply for JR. Yes, let him finish. Let him finish. Okay.
Well, I have to find the document to refer to it. But I can tell you that at that time, surely the planning department distributed the proposal to policies and departments, and their views have been reflected in the TPB paper. So was that a yes or no? To my understanding of the PS understanding was that yes, that should be there. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, there are 3 parts in this MPSC, but 2 of them are the indoor sports center and the public sports ground. If I take reference from the Cheung Kwan O Sports Center and the sports ground that is used by the East Asian Games, is also taken up by the ASD. You have experience in this kind of project. Why did you not take it up separately? Why do they have to be included in the MPSC? And I would like to follow up on one point on quantity surveying. I see that for public works projects, this is what the government said. These are the words. We think that the project cost is similar to similar projects of the government. But when it comes to quantity surveying, how is it different from private projects between the government and the private projects? How come that you would say that you would use a figure that is comparable to similar projects? Yes.
Colleague from RHSD answered the second part of that question. The first part is actually a very, very good question indeed. Why not simply have the sports ground and the indoor venue and the park built by RHSD and the other stadium built separately? We have looked at this, and during our initial studies on the financing of this project, we actually had a long discussion with the sports community and with our consultants. And there was this very, very strong view that in terms of having an integrated complex that really could meet the needs of sports development, it was essential that these be developed as one complex and also operated as one complex. In other words, we're moving away from the, as I said earlier, this kind of very passive operating model to really engaging far more with the various kind of stakeholders who will use the facility through a more active, through a direct approach. In terms of the construction, and my colleagues will be able to confirm or deny this, I think it's inevitable that you will have far greater economies of scale and far greater integration of design of the whole area if it is done as one project and managed as one project. In some cases, the the venue, the sports ground venue, will be a secondary venue for major events taking place at the main stadium, so there is a distinct advantage in having the same sort of management, the same specification, the same design and building team working on both venues. Also, because of issues such as security, such as dispersal of spectators at main events, you need to have that ability to manage the complex as a whole, rather than be constantly engaging in handing over management duties over artificial boundaries within the complex, which could possibly lead to miscommunication and could lead to other issues arising. Having looked at all these issues from management, from economies of scale perspective, our feeling was that this should go ahead as a project that was designed, that was constructed, and that in future is operated as an integrated complex rather than splitting up the individual components.
The DS on a number of occasions talked about operation. I would like to know, well, when it comes to the indoor sports center and the public sports ground, are there different modes of operation? That means that it will not be managed by the LCSD. Is that right, DS?
Chairman, we've actually previously briefed the Home Affairs panel, but I'm quite happy again to say here that the aim with this project is that it will be delivered by means of a design and build and operate contract. So what that means is that the operation of the entire complex would be under one contract. However, the different components within the complex clearly have different needs and different stakeholders. So obviously if you're managing the main stadium in a way as to attract major events, you would not, for example, be managing the public sports facilities in the same way. You would be managing them far more in a similar vein as the current public facilities are managed. However, it will be all taken care of by one operating entity.
I want it in a detailed paper. What do you actually want? I want a paper about the detailed differentiation of the different types. You can do that, DS, right, to give us a report?
The documents that we gave to the panel.
Mr. Wong, I allow Mr. Wu's second question because this time he specifically said that he has made a comparison with papers submitted to the PWSC about quantity surveying, that in those times it's not a separate item. Can you give us a focused answer explaining why there is such a difference? Thank you. For quantity surveying services, according to the paper, it's responsible for overseeing the project cost and preparing tender documents. This, compared to conventional approach and job done by other consultancies, actually similar. It's just that the figure is more. We have taken out the figure, and the job of the consultant is more specific than others, but the approach itself is similar. Dr. Kokaki, I'm getting more and more puzzled. About the $60 million is for the entire MPSC. But what I heard sent chills down my spine. It says it's design, build, and operate for the MPSC. If you use this approach to run a sports complex, but if you know that when it comes to small sports ground and indoor sports center, it won't be profitable. There's only one purpose by opening them to the public. As you know that the LCSC charges an affordable fees to use the venues for the general public who can't afford expensive venues. And I have great concern about this approach, this design, build, and operate, because we don't know who the future operator is. Has this approach been tried before? If not, you are using the residents in that area as lab rats. And it's useless for you to give us these undertakings. You can see next door, the cruise terminal is a mess. Whether it's utilization and for local residents, it's been heavily criticized, and now you're opening up another mess, and you are going to invite another tenderer to run it. Out of the $60 million, would you also study different modes of operation? And I'd like to hear from Mr. Wong. You told us about this $25 billion. Can you tell us, out of the $25 billion, how much is used on the 50,000-seat stadium? Because I'm very concerned about this. And we've heard that it's very likely that there will be project overrun. I'll give him time to answer. Yes?
To answer the second part of that question, as far as I'm aware, we do not have any experience in terms purely of sports facilities of this DBO approach that we're aiming to pursue. Clearly, there are other facilities, some of a quite similar nature in Hong Kong, such as the Asia World Expo, which do operate on a similar mode. And in other parts of the world, there are major items of sports infrastructure that are using this design, build, operate approach. The simple answer to your earlier question, I think, is simply to say that in endorsing the current application for funding that is before us for the pre-construction works, this is not tantamount to endorsing the DBO approach. This is something that we will continue to study in the pre-construction stage with our operating consultants to ensure.
Yes, you have answered the first question already.
Okay.
Clearly. 第二個問題呢?
Second question, Mr. Wong. Thank you. About the main stadium, the estimated project cost in 2009, we did a technical feasibility study. According to the findings, the stadium will cost about $7 billion. But let me reiterate that this is only a ballpark figure. The project will evolve, and there is room for adjustment. So this is only a ballpark figure. I don't really understand. We all know about this $25 billion, and $7 billion will go to the stadium. That means the stadium plus indoor sports center and the park will cost $18 billion. Did I hear you right, Mr. Wong? The prices as September 2014, according to the DS, is $25 billion. The majority, that is about $7 billion, will go to the main stadium. What about the remaining $18 billion on other sports grounds? The indoor sports center, how much does it cost? Prices of today, say for example for the others, Cheung Kwan know how much do they cost? According to the project brief, the indoor sports center costs about $2 billion. What about the others? Well, there are some challenging designs. Say, for example, it's of a large span, and the air conditioning facilities will need more space because its positioning is of international sports events. Mr. Wong and DS, you're going to give us more papers. Can you also give us a breakdown of the $25 billion in accordance with your plan at this stage? May I make a request, Chairman? Well, what about sports facilities, including indoor ones and sports grounds, and the 5,000 people one? They are constructed in the past 5 years. Can you give us a list of the project costs of these facilities so that we can make comparisons? I think this is something that should be done. Mr. Tony Tse. Now it's 10:27. There is an important statement from the government and the council today, so I do not plan to extend today's meeting. So there are only 2 minutes, but you should have 2. Do you plan to speak today or wait till next time? I think 2 minutes will do. Mr. Tse. What I want to say is that for the MPSC, we've been talking about it for a very long time. And I've done some thinking about this, and I think we should, they've done some rethinking, and I think we should respect their decision. I've heard from the government officials that this funding allocation does not mean that the DBO approach is endorsed. Based on this, I support this funding approval because I will object to the DBO approach. I'm not going to give you the reasons because I've already said that in the panel. DS, we will continue with the project discussion of the meeting. Well, I've been in the PWSC for 11 years. This is a project that may cost us an enormous amount, but the papers are quite flimsy. You'll have to supplement papers as requested. Please give them to us as soon as possible. Give us a complete set of paper. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.